My name is Zhiguang. I'm a professor at the School of International Relations and Public Affairs. My area of at Fudan University, of course. My area of expertise is I'm trained as a historian, but I'm a political historian. I do developmental studies, history of ideas. My recent focus is the theorization of the global South development and governance, that sort of things, right? So, and then this conversation is going to be sort of very much focused on the theme of this conference, but we really want to have your personal take of this topic and your personal experiences with regarding your own country's sort of needs and demands and aspirations, right? Would that maybe to the audience introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah. So my name's Francis Gatare. I'm from Rwanda, a citizen of Rwanda. I'm president of the African School of Governance. The African School of Governance is actually a Pan-African school. It's based in Rwanda, but it's established to serve the whole continent of Africa. And so in a sense, you could say I'm now a citizen of Africa.
Oh, that's a lovely expression.
Yeah.
I was in Rwanda in February. It gave me a great impression whenever I go. Rwanda was portrayed as the heart of Africa. Rwanda is a landlocked country, but you have obviously a universal ambition for a Pan-African future. How do we connect those two? Well, I mean, why do you, in the beginning, why do you call yourself Pan-African School of Governance instead of focusing on Rwanda?
I call myself a Pan-African citizen because I'm leading a Pan-African institution. The African School of Governance was established to serve the continent, not just Rwanda, because our mission is to train African leaders to serve their countries. In fact, our current cohort of students are from 14 different African countries, and we have new cohort coming on board. We expect it to come from over 20 countries, 22 countries to
all
be exact.
of them from Africa?
All of them from Africa.
Lovely.
So that's the context in which I call the school Pan-African and myself Pan-Africanist. Your recent visit to Rwanda, I'm glad that you enjoyed your stay.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I'll probably go back again.
You should come back soon. Yeah, I would love to have you back soon. You said Rwanda is landlocked. True, if you define the national boundaries.
Yes.
If you look at the size of China, a large part of China is landlocked, but you would never say that China is landlocked, right? Because it has access to the sea.
Yes.
Rwanda is actually not landlocked because we are connected to other countries in our region, Tanzania, that is on the coast, Kenya, that is on the coast. We are part of the East African community. So if you were to ignore the political boundaries, which, are there for historical reasons that you and I are familiar with, you couldn't be describing Rwanda as a landlocked country. It's a reason why in the politics of Rwanda, our country has been at the forefront of integrating Africa, ensuring that every country on the continent sees its destiny closely linked to the destiny of its neighbors and the whole continent. That way you can trade, that way you can travel, that way you can do business, and people can move cross borders unhindered. And some of those descriptions of landlockedness then would be irrelevant because, after all, access to the port would not be an issue at all because you have it anyway.
I really, really like your description, your interpretation of that. Landlocked is merely just be bounded by some of the geographic and political constraints that can be removed by human actions.
Absolutely.
And I really also really do resonate with your analogy between China and Rwanda, because many of the Chinese observers will consider China as a huge one-piece country that has always been like that, which is true. But people tend to forget that China has went, particularly since the 19th century onwards, China had went a long way from being separated, being interfered and invaded by external forces and being carved into smaller pieces controlled by different warlords to today's unified China. And I always tell my students, instead of just looking at contemporary China, let's look at the CCP governance experience all the way from the base camp area, so-called base camp area, when they started in a landlocked province that has all the disadvantages. And natural resources is their disadvantage. The land is barren, and they can't grow, they can't feed themselves. But they managed to transform, to unite, to sort of mobilize people and to combine the country together.
Absolutely. And what China has done, of course, over a period you are describing is unified itself into one nation state and one political geography. Now, it doesn't have to be done that way for the continent of Africa.
Yes.
But, Africa can still unite to become, practically connected with each other, removing obstacles, constraints that have become nation-state boundaries. And there are examples. I mean, of course, the example of European Union is an inspiring one.
And ASEAN.
Yeah, and the ASEAN and others.
So in your opinion, in your observation, what can governance or school of governance do to facilitate the realization of such a vision, Union of Africa?
The school of governance is very important because the mission of the African School of Governance is training leaders, but training leaders with a particular orientation, and we call it a mindset. And this new orientation is exactly one that sees Africa as united, as a destiny of many states whose destinies are linked with each other, whose success depends on each other. When you look at the political economy of the world today and the dynamics of the world today, you do not see any African state that is big enough, strong enough to compete by itself.
Yes.
In the global economy, yet it's a competitive marketplace. Hence, the realization that you need leadership across the continent that realize the importance of a unified approach to the international global space. When you look at the discussions on global governance that take place, Africa continues to be marginalized. But a billion and a half people, almost as big as China in terms of people, soon probably more. That is not a number of people to be ignored in the discussions about global governance if they were seeing things the same way, unified and creating space for themselves. You look at the market, the size of the African market by itself, unified, is a very strong market. You look at the resources and the people and all that. But even regionally, maybe you could say as a continent, it's far-fetched to think of it as a unified market, but regionally, blocks by themselves, chunks of it, are strong enough markets to compete in the global space. And so the School of Governance is teaching leaders with a mindset that is Pan-African, but it's also teaching leaders that have a commitment to public service.
To their people.
To their people, to the service of their people, that recognizes what a privilege one has to be in a position of leadership. And also to realize that when you have that privilege, you have not done much to earn it. It's because of the responsibility you have been bestowed on to serve others. And so we teach leaders that recognize privilege, that also understand the responsibility that comes with it to serve others.
Yeah.
We teach leaders to have confidence in themselves, to have ambition and aspirations, and to rally their communities around that ambition and aspiration in terms of a vision, so that you can have a sense of where you want to take your community, not just day-to-day living and survival. And that's very important for transforming a society.
That's very interesting because there are loads of interesting points I want to pick up on. But one thing you said, community, right? So local leaders has to have obligations, a sense of obligations and commitment to their community. But the community is not only just to their immediate community, right? Pan-Africa is a bigger community that glues everyone together. How can you make sure that the local leaders, on one hand, they are loyal, they are responsible and sensible to their commitment to their local community, but at the same time, they have a bigger aspiration to a wider community, like Pan-Africa. Because, I mean, Africa have witnessed, particularly since 1940s, various attempts of building a bigger Africa. Pan-African's initiative, Nkrumah has its vision, Nyerere has its own vision. What do you think that why Pan-African vision hasn't arrived yet as a political reality, and what Rwanda could do to make it different?
It's a complex history that we have had as a continent since, colonial times, transitioning into the struggle for independence and then post-independence until today. What we are trying to achieve today is not to ignore that history, but to say that one must not be prisoner to the historical circumstances that you have gone through. Look, Rwanda, as a country, perhaps suffered the most devastating catastrophe in recent century on the continent, where we had an internal repressive government that created the mechanism to eliminate part of their society.
Yes.
Based purely on ethnicity and fake identities, and part of our society called Tutsi people were targeted for elimination, extermination, and that devastated our nation. Destroyed the infrastructure and the economy as well as the fabric of our society. The leadership that stopped the genocide and took over after that had the hardest decision, most difficult decision of how to rebuild the nation, right? That leadership could have been overwhelmed by the circumstances and went down the spiral of revenge and war and today Rwanda could be a failed state, right? But made the difficult choices, which was forgiveness and turn around the corner and rebuild the society so that you can aspire to have a unified, community Rwandans again. That gives an example of how difficult circumstances can shape a decision to pivot and turn away from a difficult history and look ahead instead. I think that the story of Rwanda gives a lesson that as a continent, we can learn from the history of our continent and the failures we have gone through to focus on the future and rally some energy and attention to the future and dream about and imagine a new continent different from our past, even if you don't ignore the past, but you break yourself free so that it doesn't hold you prisoner forever.
How can we teach people that? Because Rwandan people experienced it, right? Physically, they experienced the trauma. How can the same level of education being spreaded to other parts of the, let's say, African continent, where people are not suffered from the same level of traumality?
So this is what we are teaching at the African School of Governance, that experiencing trauma doesn't mean that you yourself have to have been exposed to it. As a society, I think Africa has experienced collective trauma of the last several
Colonialism.
generations. You know, if you look at the age of slave trade, when most of the majority able-bodied Africans were exported out of Africa, and then you look at the period of colonialism and the experiences that nations went through, and you look at the periods of struggle for independence and what kind of the kind of violence that people went through. And in fact, post-independence, many nations have gone through different type of trauma, from bad leaders that have divided their communities, set one tribe against another, squandered a lot of opportunity through mismanagement. That's traumatic. Now, it doesn't have to continue that way. We have got to break the cycle. And at the African School of Governance, we are saying the new generation of leaders on our continent must recognize this as a collective failure and say, we can't do it like this. Now, question is how? So many times the focus is put on heads of governments and, and nations. But the responsibility starts with the leaders who are in the community level. Taking responsibility in the small community you are in, whether it's a local government, whether it's a non-for-profit organization, whether it's a company, or a volunteer organization. So we teach people to take responsibility for themselves. That good management starts with me by managing myself well and focusing on who I am. And that's why at the African School of Governance, we start by values, right? We say that good leadership has got to be values-based.
I'm glad that you clarified on that, because this is another question I want to pick up on, but you have already answered. When you say leader, you're not necessarily referring to the higher leadership.
No.
Yeah, everyone is a leader for themselves.
Everyone is a leader.
And everyone would be the leader for the local community.
And you are a leader, I am a leader, whether I have formal authority or not, or whether I have positions of leadership or not. By the way I conduct myself, I can exemplify informal leadership qualities, and that's the kind of leadership description we're making.
I mean, that exactly correlates with the new expression of agency, right? Everyone has their own agency and should be recognized for that.
Absolutely.
And then another element that you mentioned, I think resonates with the theme of the whole conference, the workshop. We want to talk about development, but that development is not only just about economic development, it's a shared development, right? Shared through all social sectors, by all communities. And you mentioned in your statement, it's not only just the government has the responsibility. When we're talking about development, when we're talking about governance, non-state actors, community leaders, educational sectors, business leaders, everyone has, as part of the bigger society, everyone has their own role, has their own responsibility. How do they coordinate with each other? And what does ruling party do in order to facilitate such concert of actors?
Development, in our perspective, is an outcome that happens as a result of every member of society contributing. So it's what happens when individuals are making the best investments in themselves, in their families, in their best interest, investing in their future, and collectively heading in the same direction. Now, that requires confidence. It requires confidence in society. It requires confidence in their safety and security. Security of people, security of their properties.
Sure.
That's where the state comes in. It requires working in a certain direction, because there is a vision of where the country or society needs to head. That vision, collective ambition, is set by the political leadership of this of
and
the
the sense
country.
of security and stability.
Absolutely, absolutely. So the role of political leaders is very important in many ways. One, to make society safe, secure, and give confidence to the citizens as well as non-citizens to aspire and invest in their future, knowing that what you are putting in the country today will give you rewards in the future. What you are investing for your young ones, for your family, will give dividends in the future and not be lost. So that confidence is key. Secondly, setting a vision for the country that everybody can rally around. Of course, it has to be the right vision. It can't be a vision that is going to
How can we
lead
make
people
sure
astray.
this is the right vision?
Yes. So people have got the ability to assess for themselves.
Right.
That's where agency comes in. Where does the state vision comes in? You articulate what individuals are speaking, what they are thinking. Iterative visioning is that there is no single all-knowing individual that will close themselves in a room and emerge out of it with a vision.
True.
No.
Yes.
A vision is set through consultations.
Right. So that's governance. Right?
That's governance, right?
Yeah.
By understanding the strengths and weaknesses of the society, by looking at the global context and harnessing the knowledge existing in the country and articulating it together. So that is for political leaders to establish. Political leaders also need to create institutions, rules and regulations that will govern society to make sure that your aspirations don't conflict with mine. Yeah, because if they do, who is the arbiter, and how do you create the rules game so that what is in your best interest is not against my interest. So that's the role.
That's arguably that's one of the most fundamental questions in any sort of a politics, right?
Correct.
Conflict resolution, because individual always have their own best interest to protect, and then at least that's the assumption, right?
Yes.
If we see the world as atomized, composed of atomized individual, then each individual have their own self-interest, and your self-interest might not necessarily be in line with my self-interest, and henceforth there is conflict.
And the perception of winners and losers, because as governments, you don't want to set policies that are going to create a few winners and majority losers.
True.
You want to always be looking out for the bigger
interest. How do we
interest.
balance this out? How do we make sure that there is a proper procedure, or there is a majority of people's interests got protected?
Right. It is in a way to optimize. There's a lot of learning about optimization theories and how do you do that, and minimization of harm. You're optimizing the good, you are minimizing the harm.
Yeah.
And if
it's
the
quite
benefit,
raw, right? So like justice theory.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Intriguingly, right? Justice theory. Since we're on that page, procedural justice has always been widely discussed for almost a century now, but it doesn't seem to provide any results, at least in many parts of the world. So in Rwanda, my last visit experience is that you didn't necessarily revert to a court to reconciliate with each other. Instead, you rely on a much more traditional practice that invites everybody to sit down together and solve the issue. So the procedural-wise, it's not necessarily in line with the Western style of arbitration, but deep down, that provides the uttermost justice to everyone, which is the future of the society's comprehensive and coherent development as one piece. Do you think that this is translatable to outside world?
Let's revisit the notion of tradition, what is called traditional.
Yes.
And what is called modern.
I mean, in facing Western, everything sort of capitalist.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what we call traditional is for us what we call the indigenous wisdom that has held our society for thousands of years together. So Rwandan society did not exist only yesterday.
Yeah, exactly.
As a people,
as many
nation
other
state,
parts of the world, they evolved into
over time. And there is indigenous knowledge that has held that societies together. And for us as a country, as a people of Rwanda, we have always had the indigenous knowledge and wisdom that has held our society together, and institutions that have held it together. And one of those is the institution of justice and conflict resolution. Now, Gacaca is what it's called.
Yes.
When we were at our worst after the genocide, when we had no other options, and all the so-called modern justice systems could not provide any solutions.
Which is pretty much the European style of justice system.
That's correct.
Right? And that it got expanded to the rest of the world because of colonialism and capitalist expansion.
And for a long time, that was being promoted as the, panacea solution.
Yes.
It was the indigenous wisdom of Rwandans that came to our rescue, because we stepped back and asked ourselves fundamental questions. As a society, what has been our values of our ancients? And how have we resolved very complex and difficult tragedies in the past? And we came back to it. And the idea was that for centuries, Rwandan society has always viewed justice and reconciliation as part of one concept. You do not have justice when there is no forgiveness, when there is no reconciliation. We, as a people, we do not thrive on punitive justice systems. That is a winner takes all. We believe that whether there is a wrong or right, in the end, you want to bring the two individuals back together.
I mean, that's strikingly similar to the Chinese legal thoughts, right? So the legal arbitration is never there to punish someone. Arbitration is a form of reconciliation that intends to bring the two sides back together. Chinese practice that in the traditional time, and also Chinese practices in the modern time. Marriage law, for example, you have to, before separation, you would have to go through a reconciliation process. And also Chinese, arguably, China is trying to promote mitigation as a way to resolve international disputes. I mean, I guess it's unfair to ask you what's your thought about it, but I'm just thinking that both of our practices seems to resonate or correspond to each other, despite the fact that we haven't talked to each other before in terms of how do we govern our people.
Absolutely.
We come up with that solution naturally, organically, and with our own sort of agency.
I'll give you an example. At the time when Rwanda was trying to resolve genocide cases, when we were faced with some of the most heinous crimes imaginable, that is the time that our country abolished the death sentence.
Yeah.
Can you imagine it? That's a time when most people would have wished that some of those criminals should be hanged, executed, or killed in the most brutal ways. But as a country, as a society, we made the most difficult decision, which was we should not be drawn in that direction. We made a decision to abolish the death sentence because we wanted to turn a page from deaths and killings to life and coexistence, even with the most difficult and heinous crimes in our society that has done. So that speaks to the idea that as a society, we wanted to go back to our historical and ancestral philosophy of justice, which was coexistence and reconciliation.
That's a wonderful conclusion for you, what we have discussed. coexistence and reconciliation,
Yes.
I guess it's not only just for Rwanda, it's for the whole world altogether.
We wish
I
so.
guess one last question I could probably ask is, the world is ever changing. Why? What brings you to China, except for the fact that we invited you over? But put it this way, what do you think that China could do or should do in this ever-changing world,
Yes.
hoping to develop a shared development for the humankind?
First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. Our school is a young school. It just started. It's only 2 years old, so it's still reestablishing itself. We are looking for inspiration to structure together the best teaching philosophy for the next leaders of our continent, of Africa. We are open to learning, to take the best from wherever we can around the world. Most importantly, picking from the wisdom of the African experience, history,
Yeah.
and others. Now, that said, there is an appreciation of what China has done for itself as a society, transforming the lives of more than 1 billion people, lifting the lives of poor people, more than 500 million people lifted out of poverty in one generation and beginning to experience, the well-being that, that everybody wishes and dreams for their own people. That's inspiring. Africa is the only place on the continent, on the planet today, which collectively is still behind, caught up in poverty. Where else would we learn fighting poverty and lifting lives of people than in China, considering what you have achieved? So China continues to provide that inspiration. Look, there is a lot of lessons from many countries in Southeast Asia and other places, but the scale at which China has done it is different. Now, China plays a very important stabilizing role globally as we go through very difficult global geopolitics and geopolitical competition, and it's admirable what this country is doing to stabilize the world. And we came to learn. We came to to build relationship and partnerships and see how you do it here, and see what lessons we can take for ourselves.
I mean, I really appreciate saying that. Interestingly, I'm doing sort of a history of Chinese internationalism. 1670s, when China first went to Africa, Tanzania, to build a railway, the first thing that they said is, we're not here to sort of build on anything. We're come here to learn. We said exactly the same word as you said.
Yeah.
We came here to learn, and I believe the same expression should be used for today's situation. I learn quite a lot when I go to Rwanda, and it's quite inspirational, and particularly it's heartwarming when I see Rwanda in such a short period of time reconciliate your society after such a heinous crime and trauma. You manage to come out of this with it's only 3 decades. And then, not only that, you came up with a systematic solution that could of relevance to other parts of post-conflict society. So I got pretty inspired and encouraged as well. And I'm leading one of my students to write a research paper on Rwanda's case. So
Thank you. I'll be very happy to contribute to your students' research.
Lovely,
Yes.
lovely. There will be loads of things we could do together in the future.
Looking forward to that.